The Secret Science Behind Miracles by Max Freedom Long. Chapter 13. A still further secret of great importance is to be had from the Kahunas. In the West, we strive to make our suggestion as potent and hypnotic as we can when putting it to healing use. The Kahunas used only mild suggestion, if it may be called that, but they knew that if a physical stimulus was used to accompany mild suggestion, the effect was enhanced to a marvelous degree. A physical stimulus is a material something or act, a thing real and tangible, which impresses the low self of the patient. Take the classic example of the doctor who gives his patient a dough pill and tells him that it will cure his ailment. The dough pill is a physical something which causes the patient to believe that a remedy is being given. The suggested healing on the part of the doctor may be hardly hypnotic at all in its potency, but when reinforced by the actual physical something, the physical stimulus of the dough pill, the healing suggestion takes magical effect. Absent treatment, which must rely on the telepathic communication of vital force and the thought forms of the suggestion of healing, is much less powerful than suggestion given with direct contact, and this is largely because of the lack of physical stimulus to accompany absent healing. The practitioner or healer who places his hands on his patient and who gives healing suggestion uses a physical stimulus in the very act of touching his patient. His very presence before the patient is a stimulus to make the suggestion take effect. But if something directly associated in the mind of the patient with healing is used, such as a medicine, even if it be useless in itself, the effect is far greater. The low self is, as we have seen, illogical. It depends largely on two ways of getting information. The first is on learning about a thing through the five senses. If a low self sees a flower, touches it, smells it, tastes a petal, hears a bee bumbling in the flower, it gets a very strong impression of that flower, so strong that it cannot be convinced that it has not seen just that flower in just that way. The second is it gets information from the middle self, which may add, in the case of the flower, the information that it is the property of the neighbor across the fence, and that it must not be picked. The low self relies on the evidence of its senses more than on anything else. It is always a little reluctant to accept the information offered by the middle self, for the simple reason that it has learned that this form of information is not always correct. For instance, as a child, the middle self may have decided that it would be great fun to roll down a hill in a barrel, even if the low self was frightened at the idea. The experiment may have proved very painful, and the resulting deduction, in brackets, animal-like reasoning power, close bracket, on the part of the low self may have been that the middle self was not too reliable in its conclusions. Many ills are caused by fixed ideas held by the low self. These fixations are usually illogical, but they are stubbornly held. It has been said that 3/4 of our ills come from such mental causes. While this may be an exaggerated estimate, the importance of mental causes of illness, accident, or trouble is not to be ignored. If we add the fact, learned from the Kahunas, that the future of each of us is built by our high selves from the hopes, fears, plans, and thoughts of our daily lives, we may say that all states and conditions can be traced to some mental origin. To these origins, the Kahunas add the the chance of attack by poltergeists or by normal departed spirits composed of combined low and middle selves and living in combined low and middle shadowy bodies. Such attacks are far more frequent than is supposed. We must also keep in mind the chance that we may pick up a suggestion which will result in illness or accident, even if the person or circumstance giving the suggestion may be said to have no intention of doing harm. An example of a circumstance giving us a suggestion of illness may be found in reading any report on the findings of psychoanalysis. A typical case almost always involves a person who became very low in vital force through weariness or illness, then, open bracket, when the middle self was weakened and unable to give the low self a logical explanation of a physical stimulus in the form of something shocking, close bracket, some shocking thing took place. The shock may be caused by suddenly seeing a crippled or an injured person, or a very ill person, or one maimed, or one being injured. Or the shock may come from a sudden thought that comes to the weary person and becomes illogically fixed in the low self. A woman, when tired after a dance, saw a man with part of his face eaten away. Her low self associated the diseased face with itself illogically, but disastrously. The woman became certain that her own face was becoming diseased and could not be reassured. She went from doctor to doctor until a psychoanalyst got to the bottom of the trouble and brought the incident to light, where it could be rationalized and drained off. In another case, a very ill and tired young man slipped on an iron step. Thereafter, he was illogically terrified by any iron step and could not use it. Psychoanalysis brought to light the cause of the trouble and cured it. The low self is accustomed to having the middle self imagine things all day long. Most of our leisure thoughts are about things that are not real and solidly present. Because of this, the low self, when told by suggestion that it is healed of a malady, inclines to consider such a statement just another imagination. It is quite convinced that it is ill, that nothing has been done to heal it, and it therefore refuses to accept and react to the thought forms planted into it by way of the hearing when the healer speaks of the healing suggestion. It is the same when we try to pray with full faith and try to tell ourselves that we have received that for which we have prayed. It is the same when we try to hold the thought that we have a new house or a healed body. The low self does not cooperate. It acts like a naughty boy, sneering and thumbing its nose at our efforts. It takes no stock in things it cannot verify with the senses in some way. If the healer gives the suggestion of healing and at the same time administers a dose of medicine with the suggestion that it will heal, and if the patient will mentally keep relaxed and not tell his low self that the medicine is no good, the suggestion, because of this physical stimulus in the form of actual tangible medicine, will be accepted and acted upon. In other words, the low self, which has not healed the illness as it should ordinarily have done, is caused to set to work and bring about the condition of health suggested by the healer and the medical dosage. If one prays for a house, uses faith, declares that he has already received the house, and gives thanks for the house, he may get the results only if he uses a physical stimulus to impress his low self that the house really has been given and is on its way. A woman I knew who prayed for her houses and usually got them had in some way divined the secret of the need of a physical stimulus. She told me that she prayed, then got a board and nail and set them before herself and proclaimed that they were the beginning of the house, which was being given in answer to the prayer. It worked, slowly but surely for her. She accumulated houses until she was able to live on her rentals. If suggestion is given at the time that vital force is transferred through the hands of the healer, and the massage and manipulation act as a physical stimulus, the combination is most perfect. Lami Lami, at its best, included all three of these important elements. In addition, medicine might be administered as herbal baths and doses. Kahunas of a special class were expert in the use of native herbal medicines. These are life-giving secrets indeed. Vital force is life. Without it, consciousness, in the form of the low and middle selves, cannot function. Without it, the physical body dies. Restore the vital force and implant suggestion in the mind of the low self that the force is to be used for healing the body. Use a physical stimulus to cause the suggestion to be accepted. Do this while laying on hands, or use absent treatment through the connecting threads of the shadowy body material. This is magic. It is low magic, while prayer to the high self and instant healing is high magic. I knew a man who was bedfast with hardening of the liver and who was in constant pain. A doctor who had stumbled upon the secret of laying on of hands and had practiced this form of healing coupled with suggestion began to treat the sick man. He told him that he could not restore his liver, but that he could remove the pain with suggestion and spinal adjustments. He made slight adjustments and so laid hands on his patient. He gave the suggestion as he willed to send healing and soothing power into the sick man. After the second treatment, the pain was gone, and the man left his bed. He had a weekly treatment, and he lived without discomfort for 3 months, dying suddenly an easy death. I saw the same doctor take a nurse aged 50 who had been sent by her hospital doctors to live with her daughter until she died. They could do nothing for her and gave her a few months to live. No one knew just what was the trouble. She had lost her vitality by degrees and could not walk. She could not speak but a few words at a time, always passing into hysteria and sometimes convulsions. This wise doctor undertook her treatment, making slight spinal adjustments while administering suggestions of returning health and strength. After 6 weekly treatments, the woman was in better health than she had been in years. She walked freely and with her head held high. There was a spring in her step and a glow in her eyes. Although the doctor knew nothing of the kahunas, he had unwittingly learned to use 2 simple forms of treatment, neither of which is magical or greatly effective by itself, but when combined are the essence of the life-giving Lami Lami. The practice of hypnotic suggestion in the healing of physical and complex conditions is at present uncertain and in disrepute. Doctors do not study the use of suggestion except in rare instances. Only the psychoanalyst and psychiatrists turn to suggestion, and these get feeble results because they do not know the magical secret of using the physical stimulus and of learning to transfer from themselves a flow of vital force to replenish the patient. Vital force is like the widow's mite. It increases as it is given. I know a man who has made a practice of healing by laying on of hands and willing his healing force to enter and heal his patients. He calls on the spirits of dead relatives to aid the process, and some of his healing has been remarkable. I asked him whether or not he found that he exhausted himself by giving out his healing force. He replied that on the contrary, he did not use it up in healing. If he did not use it up in healing, he became miserable and had to take violent physical exercise. Vital force is made from the food we eat. Almost any person could start out and walk twice as far as he expects to walk on a given day. The daily food of each of us would supply vital force enough for much more physical or mental activity. The physiologists tell us that food is turned to blood sugar, which in turn is burned up when we begin to exercise and need vital force. When we do not use up all the blood sugar supplied by the food of the day, it is thrown off by the liver as waste. By an effort of the will, one can cause the low self to create an excess supply of vital force. Almost anyone can learn to do this in a dozen lessons of 20 minutes each. When we have more vital force in our bodies than some other person and lay our hands on another person with the will to give them vital force through our hands, the flow commences. The flowing vital force becomes almost human and intelligent in its response to the willed command of the middle self. It will go to the sick part of the patient's body and strengthen it. It will carry the thought forms of suggestion with it when suggestion is given silently. It will do its work better, however, if suggestion is also given by voice and the low self of the patient made to understand what is being willed to happen by way of healing. If the vocal suggestion is made with the aid of physical stimulus, it will be most powerful. Let that stimulus be manipulation, massage, heat, bathing with some healing fluid, or giving some dosage. Now that we've learned from the Kahunas that suggestion is only the transfer of vital force from one person to another, and the accompanying transfer of thought forms to which the relaxed recipient reacts, we can see how foolish we have been in our fears of hypnosis. The fear of hypnosis and any form of suggestion has been almost a phobia with us for the centuries since mesmerism was discovered. We could not understand it, and so we feared it. Because of the use of suggestion had not been plainly described and advocated in biblical healing, the Church warned us against its use, as it has warned us against all psychical research, and as it has warned us against all medical and scientific progress for centuries on end. Religion has always become rapidly crystallized and resists anything new that threatens to cause it to change its beliefs or practices. I have been hypnotized fully, as many times as I have hypnotized others in my experimental work. I have suffered no slightest evil from it. I have watched the use of hypnosis and suggestion for 30 years. I have talked repeatedly with operators and their subjects, not once finding any single thing to show that it is harmful. Each of us is constantly using autosuggestion. If I will to rise from my chair and walk into the next room, that is simply a matter of giving the thought form of the desired action to the low self. It has become accustomed to react to such thought forms when presented by the middle self and reacts automatically, causes the body to rise and walk into the next room. autosuggestion is less effective than it should be in its general application by those hardy souls who have guessed its value. The trouble is that it lacks a fitting physical stimulus to go with it. For physical illness, autosuggestion takes best effect if given at the same time as the medicine is taken, provided the medicine is not one that has been tried before and has become known to the low self as a failure. A fitting physical stimulus which has been advocated is that of using vocal affirmations. One speaks aloud, affirming that he is healthy, wealthy, or wise. The sound of the voice is a physical stimulus, and if used often enough, and with the will coming from the middle self to accept it, has definite suggestive effects. Since the development of recording instruments for sound, suggestion has been experimentally given by such an instrument during sleep. The record is set to play softly at some time during the night, and the person receiving the suggestion goes to bed, determined to accept and react to the mechanical suggestion. As full relaxation is obtained in deep sleep, and as logical conscious mind is asleep and does not contradict the suggestion as heard by the subconscious or low self, the suggestion sinks home as intended. In the next few years, we may see amazing work done in this way toward rebuilding health and personality, even stimulating latent talents, abilities, and genius. In recent years, investigators have been at work trying to find out to what extent we have been suppressing our abilities and talents by accepting autosuggestion or unmeaning suggestion of friends to the effect that, oh, you can't do that. How many of us know whether or not we can paint, write, lecture, invent, promote, or organize? Some self-appointed teachers have soberly sold courses telling us that we have been hypnotized by the "you can't do that" suggestions surrounding us and telling us how to unhypnotize ourselves and blossom out. The results observed on the part of students have not indicated much success, but the basic idea may have been fairly close to a part of the truth. When a better method of freeing ourselves from our fixations or of "you can't do that" are found, the results should be increasingly better. Meanwhile, it is high time that we who have not crystallized our beliefs and who can still accept new truths get to work experimentally to see if the methods which worked so well for the Kahunas will work equally well for us. I am positive that the majority of a group of newly graduated doctors, regardless of the schools from which they came, could be taught to use the magically potent methods of Lami Lami in a course covering, say, 60 days. The ability to accumulate and transfer vital force would come quickly, and with that art once learned, the need of learning to administer deep hypnosis would be entirely obviated. Almost anyone, man or woman, can learn to use light suggestion. An hour of practice each school day would make expert operators out of the average doctor in the 60-day period. The rest of the class time would be profitably taken up with the business of learning the new psychology which we are recovering from the Kahunas. Out of the groups of doctors thus trained, a few might learn to use the Kahuna method of producing instant healing. And that concludes chapter 13. Now, chapter 14 is entitled startling, new, and different ideas from the kahunas concerning the nature of the complex and healing.